All right, so we're gonna move into wrist and elbow mobility, range of motion. Okay, how can we increase the range of motion? So you went through the screen, you had maybe limited range of motion, or maybe with the overpressure you experienced some pain. So these are some exercises that we can try. Let's work first on, let's say you had a noticeable change in wrist flexion, okay? I'm gonna use my right arm for example here. I would recommend starting in a short lever position. A short lever position, I'm gonna show you what that is, but that's gonna place the least amount of stretch, or at least I should say less stress to a joint and soft tissue versus a longer lever, okay? And depending on your level of irritability and pain, you might need to start in a short lever. So the way we do that is, we're gonna keep the elbow bent just like this, okay? I'm going to let my wrist dangle like this, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my other hand that I don't need to stretch, or that I don't wanna stretch out first, and I'm gonna place it just above the knuckles, and I'm just gonna give some overpressure here. You should be feeling a stretch going up the forearm. Some of you might feel it more near the elbow, some might feel the middle of the forearm, some might feel it around the wrist joint. That's okay, it just depends. We're all tight in different areas. And what we're doing is we're stretching out the wrist extensors that are on this side, okay? These muscles up here, they get stretched when we go into flexion. They shorten when we go into extension. So what you could do is, you could do 10-second holds for 5 reps, or maybe 30-second holds, 2 reps, or if it's just very uncomfortable, you could certainly just do some slow rhythmic stretching like this, where I'm going back and forth. I'm kind of pumping my wrist here back and forth. And let's just say, hey, I'm not really feeling anything. Well, let's lengthen that lever. So let's maybe go in between full extension and flexion here. Let's go here. How does it feel there? Could we go out? Same repetition, same thing. Actually, I feel that pretty good right through there. Next one. Let's say wrist extension was limited. We assessed like this, we compared, we went here, did our overpressure, and we found that, hey, we're pretty limited here. So, same exact thing. I would start with a short lever versus a long lever here for the wrist. I'd bring my elbow up just like this. I would take my opposite hand and I would pull back, okay? And from here, I'm gonna feel it maybe from the wrist all the way up to the elbow. Some of us might feel it in different aspects of the forearm. That's okay, it's not gonna be the same for everybody, and it shouldn't be the same for everybody. So here, same thing, you got your options. Can I do some rhythmic stretching here and work into it where it gets a little bit more comfortable? Or do I wanna do some holds, 5 sets for 10 seconds? Or else maybe we're doing 2 reps for 30 seconds here. I'm coming out. Going into a longer lever, right? If I can tolerate that. If not, I bring it into a shorter lever. So you get the idea, you get the concept there. Now, let's move on to that forearm rotation. Forearm rotation, we assessed it like this. We noticed a difference here. 2 options I can do, okay? What I would do is I would get into this position, because remember, we don't want the long lever. We don't want the humerus bone up here, the shoulder to be doing all the work. We want to isolate this wrist and elbow joint that are responsible for rotation. So we do that by keeping the elbow tucked against our side. What we'll do is we'll rotate palm down, take your opposite hand here. I like to use the heel of my hand. I like to grip right here, and I like to rotate down like that. Hopefully you can see that. I'll get a little bit closer just to show you. Here is my wrist. I'm taking my hand like this. I'm pushing down with the heel of my hand here, okay? So I'm pushing down. So I'm gonna be in that position, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna be here, let it go as far as it can go, and then I'm gonna give that overpressure. Yep, there we go. And after that, same thing. You can do some rhythmic stretching back and forth. You can do some 10-second holds, 30-second holds, a couple reps each, okay? If that is uncomfortable, or you're just not getting enough, what I would recommend using is like a small hammer, or like a small dumbbell, and I would just try to rotate, but you want to create a longer lever. So let's say this was a hammer and the hammer head was up here. What I would do is I would just go further away from the hammer head, and then I would just go down like this and let that leverage pull me into more pronation, okay? Or you could do the same thing as I'm doing with the dumbbell here. Next one's gonna be supination. Palm up. Was one limited? Let's say this one was limited. Same exact thing. Gonna let myself go where I can. I'm gonna take my arm, I'm gonna go ahead, grab it here, and I'm just gonna rotate myself down into more supination. So I'll show you here, get closer on the camera. Here is my wrist. I'm gonna take my hand, reach over like this. I'm gonna curl, pushing down in this motion like here to get more supination. Same thing, you could do that rhythmic, 5 reps, 10-second holds, or maybe 2 for 30 seconds, okay? And you can use that hammer drill again, right? Let's say that you just didn't like doing that, you wanted something else, maybe a little bit more of a load to get that stretch. Take a small hammer at home, something that's 16 ounces, maybe 24. I'm not saying get a big hammer and use this, but remember, this is the hammerhead or this is the weight. The further something's away from our arm, the more leverage we'll get to pull, right? And it goes supination up there like that. Last ones we have here. What we're gonna do is, one second, I'm gonna grab a towel here for a moment. So let's say we're gonna work on elbow extension. What we measured with elbow extension was, how did it look? Was it straight? Was it limited? Was it different versus my other side? Was it painful with the overpressure where we put our arm down here? So if we had a limitation with elbow extension, what we could simply do is we could take a phone book. I don't even know if they make those anymore. Some type of book you have in your home that's thick. You could roll up some towels, maybe some blankets, something that's gonna give you some support. And what I would do here is I'm gonna put this towel on my knee here. I would like something a little bit larger, but then I would dangle my arm over, okay? And then what I would do is just nice and slow, I would just take my other arm, push on the middle of my forearm to get some more of an elbow extension stretch. Ideally, I would have like my arm on an armrest or a table, something where I can really hang over. If you've noticed in the video, I probably should be up here like this where I'm really hanging over, because before when I gave that example, I was bumping into my knee there, so I need to be further over, pressing down like that. Same exact rep scheme that we talked about earlier, okay? You could do the small rhythmic, shorter holds, 5 reps for 10 seconds, or 2 longer ones is what I would do there. Final one, elbow flexion. We took that kind of thumb assessment, right? Like I think, oh, I'm touching there. Not quite there, so I would need to work on my right side. So one thing, not to get all into anatomy, you can certainly look this up on your own, but what happens when we flex the elbow is, there's 3 bones involved in that. That's gonna be the humerus, and then we got the radius and the ulna. Those come together to make up a couple of joints in the elbow. But really what happens is, there's a joint called the humeral-ulnar joint. What happens there is, and I guess to some degree the humeral-radial joint, but what happens at those 2 joints is when I bend, I get some gapping, I get some separation between those bones, okay? Let's say this is the humerus, this is gonna make up the radius and the ulna, then we get some gapping in there. A lot of times a stiff joint capsule, joint, whatever it may be, whatever's causing them to be stiff, you might not get as much gapping as we'd like. So I would take a smaller rolled towel, just as I rolled up for extension, but what I would do is I would stick this in my elbow crease, flex the elbow, and then what I would do is just try to relax, take my left arm, the uninvolved arm, and push closer. Now I'm touching, there it is, now I'm touching. And what that's doing is that's creating more separation in the joint to allow me to get more elbow flexion. And I would do the same thing there, right? Some overpressures, 5 reps for 10 seconds or 2 reps for 30 seconds. And that's a way that you can look at improving your elbow mobility and wrist mobility through some stretches.